off, for those of you who've not either seen the stall here or been to the shop, can you tell us a little bit about the concept of Lucy in Disguise?
Yeah, of course. Well, it all started a couple of years ago. Literally, Lily just called me out of the blue and was like, "You want to start a shop?" The concept was really to provide another kind of vintage shop that we didn't really feel was being offered in London. One that was not so much, kind of the rummagey vintage experience, the treasure hunt experience, or the really intimidating, really high-end experience. It's that kind of in between, and that offered a really clean, well-merchandised, really well-edited selection of clothes. For the shopper that didn't necessarily have a lot of confidence when it came to vintage shopping and needed to be guided through it, and also who didn't have a lot of time, as most of us don't.
Okay, so is there like a specific Lucy in Disguise girl, or do you have kind of mixed? Because I know that you sell clothes, but you also hire them out as well.
Yeah.
So do you find that there's different people for different?
Do you know what? Because we offer such a kind of breadth of price points, we have things for £35, and then we have things for £5,000, and then we offer the hiring service as well. We really find that we get absolutely all man and lady in there.
Okay, and obviously your next step was to create a clothing collection for Lucy in Disguise as well, which you guys can see out in the foyer there.
Yep.
So what was it that made you decide to do that as the next step?
It began because just out of sheer frustration, the sizing thing with vintage clothes, it is so hard to find the larger sizes. I mean, literally even, myself as a size 10 couldn't fit into most of the great clothes we were sourcing, and it was really frustrating that you'd have these beautiful, beautiful pieces, but that 98% of the population would never have the hope of getting into. So we just wanted to take inspiration from these pieces and make them accessible to everybody. Also we'd find garments that were they maybe had one element that was amazing that we wanted to be inspired on, but use it with another element, or maybe kind of bring it up to date for the modern girl.
Brilliant. And do you have a favourite from the collection?
From our autumn-winter collection, my favourite is a dress called the Chaplain, which is a sequin and mesh skirt with a little bow tie. I love it. I love it.
So sticking with the favourites theme, do you have like an absolute favourite vintage find, whether it's something you put in the shop or something you kept for yourself?
Do you know what? I think when I think of this question, it's about one particular haul that we found. Like, I got a tip off from a lady who was somebody I worked with many moons ago on film actually, and she called me and she says, "Look, I've got this, I've inherited this stash of clothes that I don't know what to do with, come and have a look." And I went, and it was just like, I get heart palpitations thinking about it now. It was like she had a whole conservatory stashed with like old 70s YSL and Hermes and Dior, and it was just like, oh my god, I fainted. And not only that, she had all the pictures of her great aunt wearing it, and like letters from her boyfriend, and it was just, for me, that's the magic of vintage, is thinking about the story behind the dress and letting your imagination run wild about where that dress has been and what adventures it's had. And so that for me was just a dream come true.
And are there any kind of ones that got away that you didn't?
Not yet, actually. Not yet. I mean, there's always things that you can't afford or that don't make commercial sense. One thing that I really regret is that very early on when we opened our shop, there was one jacket that I loved that should never have been offered for sale, and it was a hire-only piece, and it got mixed up and it got sold, and it was a little Machino cropped blazer with beautiful gold lobsters embroidered on it, and that was never supposed to go, and I think about it every week, I think. So
if anyone in here bought it,
yeah, think about it.
So something that I'm always interested in is there's a lot of debate about when something stops being second-hand and becomes vintage. And everyone has a different idea of what that is. So to you and to Lucy in Disguise, how do you define vintage?
Well, we go by the 20-year rule, which is because when I was shopping in a flea market in Paris once, a little old French lady told me, "Oh yes, it comes from the French word for 20." So that's what we go by. But having said that, we still, if something that we've got an amazing Liar piece from 95, we'll put it in. It's not.
There's always there. And when it comes to your own vintage style, are there any kind of specific eras that you're drawn to, or designers that you always kind of keep your
Yes, well, a year ago I would have said without fail the 70s, because it embodied everything, all kind of different facets of my personality, which is like real like hippie chick by day, disco diva by night. So that was like, it offered everything for me. But now, I mean, I don't get to be a hippie and I don't get to go to discos anymore. So for me, I think my wardrobe has shifted more towards like little 60s dresses for workwear for the day. If I'm in business, I like a bit of 80s power dressings. But I don't like to be constrained.
Absolutely. Okay, so moving on to kind of tips that you picked out working with vintage. Do you have any like really great tips on how to keep pieces looking their best? So I know a lot, particularly 50s and 40s, is so fragile. And
yeah,
it's almost like art rather than
absolutely. Well, I mean, storage is really key. You shouldn't really hang anything that's particularly delicate or treasured. And also don't keep it in plastic boxes, because plastic boxes, like a lot of people think seal it in plastic boxes, but actually that all the natural fibres from all old garments, they release water if you keep them sealed. It's like kind of the greenhouse effect. So then that makes the colours run and all sorts of things can happen. So the best way to store it is always like tissue paper in a cardboard box. Also moths are an absolute nightmare. I've had so many clothes ruined by moths, it's horrible. So when we buy something, we put it in the freezer for 3 days. Yeah. You have to wrap it in tissue paper, then put it in a like sealed plastic bag. That's the only time you put it in plastic. And then put it in the freezer, and then let it defrost naturally. Quite odd.
And I know you're very keen on sort of, especially with the collection, on modernising things just to stop them looking a bit fancy and drab. So do you have any kind of top tips for how to make vintage work in a more modern wardrobe?
I don't like this question because I don't see vintage as a whole, like this is vintage and this is contemporary. You know, I think you should approach incorporating vintage into your wardrobe as you would any other piece. You know, it's so many modern designers take their inspiration from vintage pieces anyway, so that there's a lot of cross. You know, there's a lot of cross there between what's vintage and what's new. So just approach each outfit that you put on the same, whether it's vintage or whether it's contemporary, and wear what you feel comfortable in, wear what, just don't over-accessorise. The Chanel rule is one that I always go by, is take off 2 accessories when you go out the door. Yeah, I think, just wear what you feel confident in. If you don't feel confident when you step out the door, then it's all pointless.
Very good. And thinking about kind of inspirations, who is on your ultimate best dress list? Either modern people or people from history?
From history, I love the 60s girls. I love Jean Shrimpton, Francois Hardy, and then I also love Bianca Jagger. I remember really wanting to be Bianca Jagger when I was growing up. I just thought she was just the coolest thing. In fact, I blame her for my partying years. Seeing her step out of Studio 54 was what started it all off for me. But I think the greatest inspirations for me have been people that I grew up with. My mum always had such an amazing group circle of friends. My mum was a punk, and then she was a rockabilly, and then she was like an 80s club girl, and so I absorbed all that growing up, as did Lily, and we used to just raid my mum's wardrobe the whole time and chop it to pieces, and so that's my greatest inspiration. Today, I think I love Chloe Sevigny, I love Carrie Gillan, I just think she's the cutest thing ever. Yeah.
Okay, so my final question is, a very big question I guess, is what's next for Lucy in Disguise? That you can tell us.
Well, we're just going to, continue to do our collection. We don't have any plans for a massive rollout in terms of the vintage store. We just really see the vintage store as our clubhouse, and the thing that anchors it, and the thing that inspires us to do the collection. And I think we just want to grow. We're new at this, and we want to absorb everything. We learn so much every day, and that's it really. Who knows where we'll be in 5 years.
For those of you who don't know, by the way, that obviously there's the store outside, or the flagship store is on 48 Lexington Street.
Yes.
So
you can't miss it. It's completely covered in gold.
Has any questions?